Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Commerce Lab by Ecomcy, the place of anything related to Amazon FBA private label and e-commerce. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, the founder and CEO of Ecomcy, and today we bring you another special guest. His name is Chris Shipferling, and he's the founding partner at GW Partner and also the founding partner at South Call, two amazing companies that they specialize around the niche of helping you when it comes to the exit of your commerce business. And that's actually going to be the conversation today. We know in the last couple of months, if not years, the whole space has been a bit, all over the place when it comes to the aggregators, the multiples. People don't know how to actually prepare for exit and all of that. So today, Chris, with all his knowledge and experience in the space, is going to give us a little bit of those, gold nuggets, as they call it, to make sure you maximize the exit when you reach that stage. So, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here on the show. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to be on. And like we were saying earlier, it's nice to finally meet. I've seen a lot of LinkedIn posts with you in them. And I've seen a lot with your business posted everywhere. And we know a lot of the same people. And at least we can now meet virtually. So nice to finally meet you.
I know. And for me, it's also a pleasure to have you. At the end of the day, the reason why I created this podcast is to have, experts from the space, but not only to bring people to my community, but also to build, partnership with them. Because let's be honest, sometimes this business is global and you have some people in India, some people in China, some people in the USA, and a space like this, allows for creating those meaningful relationships that sometimes, the distance doesn't allow for that, right? Now, let's start with you, Chris, because I know you have a very interesting background as well before founding and working on these two amazing companies that I just quickly introduced. So tell me a little bit about what brought you to where you are right now, and what were some of your experiences with that.
Yeah, so my entire career was focused on being a sales and marketing executive in consumer products. And so I worked for companies that were both publicly traded and owned by private equity. I started off at a Japanese company that was publicly traded on the Nikkei. I worked for their subsidiary, starting off as just a low level.
You speak Japanese or not Japanese?
Oh my gosh, squishy.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Continue.
I know arigato gozaimasu, and that's about all I remember.
That's good enough.
I was getting pretty good because every time I would go visit Tokyo for board meetings, they would put me in. They'd put me in the area of Tokyo where they don't speak. It's like traditional Tokyo, like they don't speak a lot of English. Okay. Yeah, so like my hotel, it was a struggle. Like I had to do a lot of sign language and. I can imagine. So I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time in China working with factories that built and manufactured and produced, designed product for very large household brands. And so it was a really great experience learning how to effectively understand how a consumer products brand works, from manufacturing, producing the idea, differentiating the idea, solving a problem, to then all the way from supply chain to distribution and real channel strategy. And we sold to everybody. And that's really where I cut my teeth on kind of leading the charge for the company, on working with a lot of e-tailers, as we called them back then. So, sitting in a booth and at the ABC trade show back in 2003 or 4, and this bookseller comes up saying they want to sell baby products. And, they happen to be called Amazon.com. And no one wanted to sell them because they were like, well, this is just a bookseller. I think we were one of the first baby brands to actually sell to Amazon.com back in the day.
Wow.
And then just establishing, I remember getting a phone call from a guy and said, hi, I forgot his name. He was the buyer at CSN Stores, which turned into Wayfair. And so, the genesis, like Zulily, I worked with a gal from babyuniverse.com who was like the 10th employee at Zulily, and just like, I saw the genesis of all these e-tailers starting to pop up. And, through that time, Amazon FBA was becoming a thing. My brother-in-law he was one of the first guys he was one of the first guys I know, and one of the first guys to be on FBA, like back in 2007, 2008. So yeah, I think we're good though. If you can hear me, we're good. So I was just saying, I worked with a myriad of different companies. I worked with a lot of different retailers. It was just incredible experience to really understand, hey, again, how do I take a differentiated product and put it on shelf next to a lot of other competitors in a retail environment, an e-tail environment. And so, yeah, I learned a lot, and I was running sales and marketing at that company before I left. I moved to Evenflo, which is a big household brand as well. This is all in the baby space. I did a little bit in toys. So I worked for Evenflo for a few years. They were owned by huge private equity called Weston Presidio. They also owned JetBlue. They were original investors in JetBlue and Guitar Center and Party City. And yeah, so it was big, kind of a much, I'd say, bigger experience. I worked with a lot of folks from Procter & Gamble at that company. And so that was also a great learning experience. And I was a director of sales there for a few years. So I then worked for a Barcelona-based company for about 4 years. They hired me to bring their product into North America. Their organic markets were Spain, France, Italy, and also UK and Germany. And so they had really no presence whatsoever. It was a really tough go. I learned a lot. That's where I started to learn my appreciation for being an entrepreneur. I mean, even though I was part of a larger organization, they were about I want to say about $150 million company. I felt like I was an entrepreneur because it was me. I had to hire the team here. I had to hire the service providers. I had to work with their product managers and their brand managers to articulate how a American consumer was going to translate the brand, think about the brand, and convert on the brand. And that's actually, just being succinct, that's actually where I also learned how to do Amazon myself. So I was stuck with a bunch of inventory. We were going through different collections. And I was so tired of hearing what the buyer had to say at Bye Bye Baby. I said, hey, it's time to learn Amazon. So I listened to AM PM podcasts religiously with Manny Coates.
Manny Coates, yeah.
Yeah, and with Kevin King. Yeah. In fact, when I first met Kevin, I was like, hey, man, you taught me Amazon. And he's like, who the hell are you?
I think Kevin is like that grandfather that everybody has, like, that teach you all the different things of life. That's Kevin,
It is Kevin. He is kind of the guy, who's the professor? There's the professor of Amazon, Howard, but then Kevin's the grandfather, man. So anyways, and then I did all the white papers, and I downloaded as many podcasts as I could listen to. And I learned how to take a widget from a warehouse and run it through back in 2014-15, where advertising was so much more simple.
20 cents per click.
It was, and I learned, hey, keywords matter. Here's where you do keyword research. Manny just launched Helium 10, I think, in 2015. And so I was really learning how to optimize, and I learned it. I really did. And I was, and I also knew, hey, look, this is kind of where the world is headed. Direct to consumer is going to be not the thing. It's going to be one part of, a really good optimized consumer products brand. And I also noticed that there were a lot of my peers from other brands that just had no idea what they were doing when it came to digital strategy. So Jeanne was the name of the company. They decided to focus on their organic markets and shut down anything that was non-organic for them. And so at that time, I was kind of forced off a cliff to do my own thing. So I started a consulting agency where I helped businesses formulate digital strategy. So I worked with them to dig in on, okay, how can we optimize your Amazon? You're not on Amazon. You're only with 1P. 1P is terrible for you. Let's open up a 3P strategy. It was a lot easier. This was back in 2016. So again, everything was a lot easier when it came to Amazon. But nonetheless, it was wonderful. So I also learned just direct to consumer, period. What is it like to really reach the consumer and have that conversation with them through all types of acquisition channels. And at the time, the acquisition channels were a lot more simple too. You had Google ads, you had SEO, and you really had Facebook advertising, and which was, Instagram and Facebook. Obviously, TikTok, I don't even know if it was around yet. Not many people were really doing much with Pinterest. Twitter was not really a thing for consumer product brands. And so really just focusing in on those activities, how do you help a larger company think through optimizing their website for conversion and which acquisition channels and metrics they should be thinking about. So that was kind of my journey. I met these guys here in Charlotte. We started Global Wired Advisors. They were investment bankers. big managing directors of institutional investment banks. So they had the financial engineering. They all became entrepreneurs. I was an entrepreneur at the time, of course. And then we just said, hey, why don't we take what you normally get out of, if you're a large company and you go to Bank of America and say, sell my business, the process by which you go through to sell that company is very different than a process through a business broker. There are no listings. There's no email lists. There's lots of thoughtfulness, thoroughness, detail, complexity. There's a lot of, actual real strategy, kind of thinking through who are the right people to buy this, but then how are they going to think about it? Whereas a broker, which has its place in what I would call Main Street, where you just kind of put together enough, like a real estate listing, like it's just enough. You do it. The seller or the buyer is doing a lot of their own legwork, and really just trying to understand what's really going on with the company. And to be honest with you, the broker truly is just more or less a facilitator. And so we said, hey, why don't we take this process that has worked for Fortune 100, Fortune 500 for a very, very long time. It's highly effective. It optimizes the sale of a business. Why don't we take this process and why don't we apply it to businesses in this e-commerce kind of consumer product space? And so we did that about 6 years ago. This was pre-aggregator, so I can say it's like
one of the first aggregators.
Yeah. So I mean, look, you had some good brokerages at the time. You had a Quiet Light brokerage, you had Website Closers. They've been around for a while, and you had a few others. But what we noticed was no one was really doing what I said, which is we didn't really see anyone taking an investment banking process and applying that to this particular space. And it just
let's be honest, most people 6 years ago were never thinking about exiting an Amazon business. Selling on Amazon was more like you make a quick buck and then you close the account, but it was never thought as a business.
Yeah, no, it's true. You kind of nailed it. It's like, hey, I'm going to arbitrage. I'm going to go and find a bunch of product that I'm going to buy from the store at $1 and sell for $3. I'm going to go to Alibaba and hack Alibaba to find, this keyword I'm seeing is trending on Google. It's like crypto, to be honest. It's like altcoins. It's very similar. It's like, well, which altcoin's about to explode and then just completely crash? And so, that's right. And then it was around that time when we discovered that people were really either utilizing Amazon as a sales channel, and they had a real brand, real kind of what I would call a diversified brand, or they were primarily on Amazon, but they really cared about their brand. They cared about the products they were making. They were solving a problem. They put a lot of thought into it. And around the time that we came on the scene, which was 2018, that's about the time you started to see M&A activity really start to go up. And I mean, at the time we weren't selling large businesses. I mean, it was still, we're still selling businesses 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million. We weren't doing that much. And then all of a sudden, you had pandemic. Everybody did this. Aggregators came on the scene. So that leads us to today, kind of where we're at. And I can get into more detail about we've done pivots since then, but I can get into more detail later.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I love the journey because the fact that you've been touching so many areas within the ecosystem of selling on Amazon and e-commerce in general. I bet that in terms of M&A and preparing the business for exit and all of that, it makes your job so much easier because you understand the logic behind all the things that business has to do to be successful. Because it's not the same that you come from M&A, but you know your numbers and finances. But if you don't know the actual grind inside the e-commerce side of things, you can miss a lot of things that sometimes that's the potential you can leverage. So that's super useful.
No, it's very true. I've got some good friends of mine who run a middle market healthcare investment bank, and they've never owned a pharmaceutical. Well, actually, they have a private equity arm where they do own pharmaceutical companies like smaller pharma, smaller healthcare. But at the same time, it's very much identical, and that's where you find your best M&A advisor. Is they're not just completely, oh, I was an operator, I can now sell your business. That's still a bit disjointed.
Conflict,
It's a bit that combination of, hey, we've got the institutional investment banking chops, we've got the consumer product chops. We're going to combine those skill sets and deploy that into your business. So that way you have a much more optimized trade. And oh, by the way, we're not going to do the whole business broker thing. Just sell and give it a good try. Let's see if anybody bites. We're going to actually deploy lots of thoughtfulness and strategy into the company to mold it towards when is the right time. So it's thinking not, we'll just try to, no, let's actually discover the right path towards when is the right time at the right value. Does it match your goals? That's when you really get the good molding of the two.
Exactly. Now, let's start touching a little bit about how this whole thing started and where we are right now. Because let's be honest, in 2020, 2021, when the whole explosion of aggregators came into play, I mean, I remember I was having at least 5 emails per day from people, aggregators, saying like, if you have a brand, I give you 5% referral, 10%, $200K, $1 million, things like that, you know? So it was all over the place and the multiples were crazy. Like, one of the reasons that I feel like the situation got so bad is because they had so much money in their hand, because everything that was going with COVID and government basically giving money for free, they had to deploy this money. And because they didn't really understand e-commerce in depth, some of them, we need to deploy this money regardless, and they were paying these 6 to 10 times multiples that there's no way you're gonna make your money back on that, right? And some of these business, I feel they couldn't even improve them further. They were just buying them and then, you know, we're gonna do anything better on this business. So the reason why I want to make this introduction is because now we come to 2023, things are completely different. Some of these aggregators went out of business. They couldn't handle basically all this bleeding in terms of the money they invested, and some of these brands going under. And now we see basically, you know, the market reaching a stable, basically situation where things are going back to normal. Multiples are back to 2 to 3 times across the board. Again, there's some exceptions, but that which we can touch on that. But I want to hear your feeling on this, because so much has changed. And I feel when I talk to my clients and people in the space, like, people now feel discouraged because some of them feel like, oh man, I could have gotten 6, 7 times multiple. Now the multiples are nowhere there now. Like, what should I do to maximize my exit? What are some of the tips? Where should I sell now? So what is your take on that? Yeah.
Well, to anyone who thinks that, just remember there's always the trade that got away, and it's more the trade that got away than not. So you'll always meet the guy who says, I could have invested in Google in 1998. I could have invested in Amazon in 1994. I could have bought Bitcoin at 10 cents back in 2000. You always have that. So just take that away, right? And in this case, unfortunately, the way you just described it was perfect. You had an anomalous event. And that only comes once in a lifetime, man. That's really what it is. It's a lot like what we're experiencing in AI right now, which is a lot like the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s and late 1800s. It only comes once a century, where you have this seismic shift in the way that we conduct business and the way that we conduct commerce. And so this was a blip. It was an anomalous event. We have reverted to exactly what you said. There's been a reversion back to, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 multiple.
If you have a unicorn,
If you have a unicorn, and we'll get into in a moment. There are, CPG brands are still trading for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 multiples. I mean, that's normal. CPG has slowed down and multiples have compressed slightly, but at the same time, like, that's a whole different ballgame than just your audience listening who's Amazon only, which there is a contrast there. So yeah, look, you nailed it. State of the market was up, completely back down. You got a lot of sellers who are now going, well, what do I do next? What am I supposed to be focused on? I think almost just, by what I would call, organically, they've just said, hey, that was anomalous. I'm just going to focus on growing my business. And the current state of the union is, if you've got an all Amazon business, yes, absolutely. It's not easy to sell the company. It's not as easy as it was 2 years ago. So you've got to really now focus on what I would call, true asset principles for your consumer products. You have to start thinking about yourself as a consumer products brand, and not like what we just said, which is, well, I'm just going to hack my way into growing this company. That's actually, and I want to say this, and I've said this on a couple other podcasts, that's a totally fine way of running your business. There is no good or bad.
Yeah.
It's the outcome. It's the end. That's just
the decision you make. Yeah,
exactly. So if I say, hey, look, man, you know, you and I, we're going to go into business together and all we're going to do is cash flow this thing. Well, that's a much different mindset where we're going in basically saying, okay, let's do the keyword research thing. Let's try
do an exit. Yeah.
Let's automate it through AI. Let's do all these things to where, hey, if it goes away in 2 years, we don't care. We're going to cash flow it. Now let's have a discussion about that cash flow. Is it my own personal bank account? Am I reinvesting it in other activities? Am I sending it off to real estate? Like, what am I doing with that cash flow? If you want to actually build something to sell, if you want to build something to then eventually exit, and you're a consumer products brand that's only on Amazon, well, now you have to flip your mentality because it's a different ballgame now. You have to think about it in terms of, okay, there's a path and a strategic plan that I have to follow. There's a way to now build this brand. There's a way for me to now, I have to think differently about my product development. I have to think differently about the way that I present my brand. I have to think differently about my listings. I have to really think about channel diversification and channel expansion. And what does that really look like? Can I actually do it? Do I have the amount of margin in dollars to be able to do any of that? Because that's a way to present yourself as a more attractive target to buyers, right? Exactly. And the other thing a lot of people don't realize or don't think about is the mentality has always been on SDE and a multiple of historical data. When you want to try and bring multiples up, you've got to think about the future. And there's a lot of brands that are not really, there's a lot of Amazon specific owners that they've of course thought about the future. So I'm not going to be egregious, but they've never really taken the time to go, okay, I'm actually going to plot out the future.
Exactly. And that's this thing you just say, something that is perfect to bring this next question, which is, a lot of times when these people are preparing for exit, and I bet you get this question a lot, is they ask me, I have my business on this specific stage, like I'm preparing for exit, but let's say I'm a business that only sell in the United States and I have the possibility to do international expansion, as you mentioned, right? Sometimes there's always this fear that comes into play into the strategy, like I either do it and I fail doing it, and therefore if I fail doing it when it comes to selling the business, that's like a stain on the business, like I tried and it didn't work out. Or I could sell it as an opportunity, right? And that comes down a little bit to what you're basically outlining, which is thinking about the future and how you pitch your business for the future growth. So basically, to summarize, like right now, if you're in a position that you have the opportunity to add other channels like Walmart, Shopify, expand to other countries, or you have the option to streamline all your things in the US, get your profit rights, your sourcing, pricings, and everything, and then pitch it like, I haven't done these things, but the opportunity is there. Like, with these two scenarios, realistically, where do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I know it's a question of a lot of brand owners for sure. Bottom line is, if you don't actually go and exercise those potential acquisition / channels or sales channels, then you better have a highly defendable opportunity. Like, you can't just write down, this could go on Shopify. Well, if I'm a sophisticated buyers pay more.
Exactly.
And they only pay more when they start, because they ask the right questions and you articulate the opportunity to them to where they go, well, this is just a no-brainer. Of course I want to buy this. So for instance, if you just say, hey, my opportunity is Shopify, and I go as a buyer and say, okay, but your AOV is only $27. You understand that average CAC is about 27 to 30 bucks. So are you telling me you're not a consumable? So I'm not going to get hardly any LTV out of this. So nope, that's not an opportunity for me. Okay, well, you can expand to other channels. Okay, cool. Have you thought about how much that's going to bring in terms of accretive revenue to the business? You better have a really, really good forecast. And I'm going to ask 15 questions.
I'm going to go in depth.
I'm going to poke so many holes in the forecast. And if I come away from that conversation going, okay, this is real opportunity, because you've done your homework, you've done your research on, current markets. how much is my market share in Germany, in France, and the UK? What's my cost to get into these markets? What's the keyword research that backs up if you're on Amazon, if you're doing something different with other marketplaces? I need to understand all of the information, because the more you can get detailed and get complex with me as a buyer, I welcome that, because you are making me have an appetite for wanting to purchase the business. So that's really the mix. So you either go for it and you do it. And oh, by the way, if you were going to fail at all these things anyways, your plan and your forecasts were going to fail too.
Exactly.
Most of the time. You do have stories of people, you know, I don't know, I plotted it out, but then all of a sudden it just went crazy, and I was unexpected. And it's like, that's the exception, not the norm. And so that's kind of how I address that, which is, okay, cool. Like if you were to go for it and fail, I would have been able to make your opportunity fail on paper, for sure.
Nice. Good. Now, I bet a lot of people that are hearing this and watching this, they might be asking, oh, it sounds interesting. I really want to dig further and see if, you know, I can sell my business. How do I identify if I am at the right stage to sell my business? So I know right now the criteria from most people has changed completely to compared to the last 2 years. Like now people is looking for higher revenue, different profit margins and so on. So can you briefly touch on right now in 2023, what is realistically a business that, you know, is attractive, have a good chance to have a successful exit, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, look, it really, again, it goes back to your goals. So for instance, if you're listening and you're a $1 million, $2 million brand, you know, there are buyers out there for your business, you know. And if you're just only on Amazon, but you know, you've got defendable product, you've got defendable forecasts, defendable projections, there's a buyer, especially if you're domiciled in the United States. You've got the ability to exercise what's called the SBA loan, which I think you might be familiar with. So you can purchase a company through the SBA loan. While interest rates have driven those interest rates higher, there's still really great SBA loan brokers. A good friend of mine is one here in Charlotte. Steven Spear is another guy who's just does a great job when it comes to helping buyers identify good opportunities and utilizing that SBA loan. He's got his own pool of capital as well to kind of help those buyers identify more what I would call Main Street businesses, small businesses. So there's still a buyer, but you know, again, you hit a ceiling. Like you're just going to sell for 2.5, 3 multiple. That's all you're going to get out of it. Now, people go, well, why should I sell? And I always just go, yeah, look at your salary. When you're $1 million business, you're not making anything for salary. Exactly. You're putting all of your money back in inventory. So at that point, if I've got 200,000 of SDE and someone's offering me 800,000, that is literally 8,000% more than what you make at $0 or whatever it is.
Exactly.
And so that's my argument to them, which is you're not making anything. You just have $1 million business or a 7.
Which sounds amazing to say to your friends. Yeah, I got a $1 million business, but the reality is that
it's amazing. It's amazing until you and I are at the pub and I have to borrow money for my beer, right? So that's where it's not amazing.
Yeah, I know.
So that would be the argument there. I mean, look, you know, anybody who's really grown something pretty strong on Amazon that's listening right now, they've got real defendable product. They're really concerned around brand building. You know, what makes you a more attractive target? It's a lot of what we just discussed. I mean, you know, we could spend a whole podcast going into, we could do a whole series going into going by function and what makes you more attractive. But to speak to it very high level, I've got a brand, and brand is identified in a few different ways. Can I have the second conversation with a consumer? But do I create a community? Do I create an affinity towards my brand because I've either solved a problem for them? I've got a, you know, diversification of product. I've got something truly differentiated that is just, you know, it can be sold to lots and lots and lots of people, right? It's not a commodity. That's really what I'm trying to say. And unfortunately, Amazon has a propensity. Amazon as a platform has a higher propensity for commoditized products than differentiated products, unfortunately. But commoditized products don't sell. They just don't. They don't sell in terms of no one really wants them. So kind of focus on brand building, and then you really start to take yourself. You're already taking yourself seriously, so I don't want to dilute that. You're taking yourself seriously on Amazon. Now it's time to think about a strategic plan to get off Amazon and to think about how I can now diversify into what I would consider concentric circles of difficulty when it comes to becoming a more attractive target, right? If I can, your lowest hanging fruit is always the marketplaces, always. Okay, Channel Advisor can help with that. Like one touch button and boom, I'm everywhere, right? So, Newegg and Rakuten and Walmart and Home Depot and Macy's and all these other, that's all your low hanging fruit. So that doesn't necessarily bring you a lot more multiple when it comes to selling the company. When you start to really begin an effort of selling direct to the consumer through a platform like Shopify, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, etc., you start to collect data from those consumers. You start to have optimized acquisition channels, and you have strong LTV, and you're bringing your CAC in line, and your AOV. There's actual CRO optimization that's happening. You have a SEO strategy that's building an aggregate. These are the things. You build a community of followers through social media, and you're becoming a brand at that point that people are telling their friends about. I don't tell my friend to go buy Scotch tape, but I am going to tell my friend about this new brand that I just bought, Bad Birdie and Swanee's golf apparel, because it's cool stuff, and I like what they stand for, and I really like the brand. And so that's when you start to get into more difficulty, and the more complexity, the more attractive you're going to be, because you've built a foundation for someone to say, I can build on this, whether that's through a strategic that says, hey, I can take you and run you through my operations, and I'll get a ton of operational leverage and a ton of economies of scale. And oh, by the way, you already have a brand that people recognize. Yeah, those. And then the final concentric circle is, I got to call it out. If you can get into retail, that's your true litmus test, where you haven't necessarily, I wouldn't say you've arrived. If you've successful in retail, you kind of have arrived. When you can really sell to a Target and
a Walmart or something.
Manscaped is much dude wipes, Manscaped, they're much more valuable because they got into retail. Much more valuable.
I know. Awesome, Chris. So, thank you so much for all your insights and all your knowledge. It's been a pleasure. And, before we conclude today's episode, I want you to also share with us, where people can find you, because I'm sure a lot of sellers now want to dig this further with you and your team to explore if they can exit. Please share with us, how they can basically get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So go to gw.partners. We're a modern company. We're a modern firm. So gw.partners, not .com. A lot of people do that and say you don't have a website. And I say, you can fill out the contact form. You can go on my LinkedIn, Chris Shipferling, and find me. Reach out, DM me. We are now starting to offer what I would call friendlier products for just Amazon sellers. So what I described, someone who's a 2 to 3 multiple, we're starting to offer a product where we do it more on a consulting basis versus just a success fee. So we'll work with you to kind of help you prepare the company, get your financials in order, help articulate what could be the opportunity, poke some holes in it, like I said earlier, and then tell you where to sell it and how to sell it. And we're really equipping them on how to do it themselves, and really saving a lot of money in a success fee. Obviously, if you're someone over 10 million of revenue, I can hear you now. Yes.
Yeah. So you're saying over 10 million? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just saying, if you're over 10 million, that's not a product you'd ever want to, you wouldn't go through a product like that. You'd want to go through a product that's much more sophisticated, because it's a process that reaches out to, bigger, better corporate development desks, et cetera. So
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Chris. So thank you very much. I'm going to make sure to put everything down in the description. And in the meantime, it's been a pleasure, and looking forward to having the next one. Yeah.
Me too, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.